Signs of the Southland. Gentlemen, it is July 31st, 2023. The MLS transfer window is almost over. The Major League Baseball trade deadline is almost here. It's been such a busy week in the city of Atlanta, and we get to cap that off. Well, I guess it's a starting cap for us here on Monday with talking to Chad Bishop at the AJC. He is following in Ken Segura's footsteps as the Georgia Tech beat writer. Mr. Bishop, how are you doing today? How are you?
I'm doing great. I can't believe you said, July 31st, right? Hard to believe. It's silly when people say, where did this month go? Time flew. But seriously, man, it's August tomorrow on Tuesday, and football practice starts, and we're going to be right back in the thick of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Football, I believe their fan day is just coming up on next Saturday on August
Yeah.
5th. But before we get into the football talk, let's talk a little bit about you. How did you get into sports journalism to begin with? How did you end up at the AJC?
Oh, man, those are two pretty wild stories. I went to Georgia Southern in 2001 as a wide-eyed starting to experiment with alcohol freshman. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life until 2004. I say I was a redshirt junior at that time, let's put it that way. And I was in the student section at Georgia Southern, and the basketball student section was actually right behind press row. The press sat on the floor. So we had a pretty good rapport with the local Georgia Southern beat writer at the time, a man by the name of Scott Garner, a Shiloh High School graduate nonetheless. And one night he wore a shirt to the game that simply said The Bachelor across it. Black shirt, white lettering. So the whole game, the student section is, "Hey, Bachelor," we're being idiots. That night after the game at the bar, I actually ran into him and struck up a conversation and, hey, man, hope he didn't take offense to it. And, he was in great spirits, learned that he's from the same county I'm from. And in my stupor, I said, well, I'd love to be an intern, this summer. And he was like, yeah, man, call me up tomorrow. For whatever reason, I did the next day. I had the bravery to go and do that and called him and said, hey, this is Chad. I don't remember last night chatting with me, but I'd love to be an intern. And summer 2004, I started interning for the Statesboro Herald I was covering like middle school football and rec league baseball in the lead up to high school football. So that's where it started. And in '04 as an intern, started full time in winter of '06, right before I graduated, and just been on a journalism journey ever since. The AJC story is just as wild. January 31st, I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Vanderbilt, which is where I was working, was about to play Alabama in basketball, the number one ranked Crimson Tide. The Commodores would go on to lose by 60 points. That's not a lie. Go look at that box score. Pretty infamous game for Jerry Stackhouse and company. But anyway, that morning I woke up at like 4 a.m. I have no idea why. I woke up and I was, perusing the internet, getting some work done. I thought, well, I'll check the job board, see what's out there. And sure enough, Georgia Tech beat writer, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I said, well, I'll throw my hat in the ring. I don't really want to leave Nashville. I don't really want to leave Vanderbilt, but let's see where this takes me. And they started interviewing me and went through a long process of interviews. The end of March, got a phone call, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to go a different direction. All right, that's cool. I get it. Go to the Masters, cover the Masters because Vanderbilt had a young man playing in the Masters. Ran into Chris Vivlamore, the sports editor. Ran into Ken. Chatted with those guys. Back of my head, I'm thinking that's odd that I ran into those guys after just interviewing with those guys. And about, a week or two later, I got a text saying, hey, Chad, are you still interested in this position? Let's chat tomorrow. And sure enough, they said things didn't work out with some other candidates. I was still on the table. And if I was still interested, they'd like to offer me the job. And of course, I accepted. And that led me all the way up to middle of May is when I actually kind of first started. And then had a newborn baby in the middle of June. So went right back on vacation after starting. But now I'm here. It's full steam ahead. It's been a long, winding road to get here. Grew up reading this newspaper, and all these years back, I'm back writing for it. So it's pretty exciting.
I was going to ask. So you're writing for the paper or record, really, for the city and the state. That's got to be Got to be pretty neat. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, but even growing up there, you see AJC on a lot of bylines. So that's
Yeah,
pretty neat story.
it is amazing. I mean, growing up in Gwinnett County and interning and then working at the Statesboro Herald. I mean, I applied for jobs at the Macon Telegraph and the Gwinnett Daily Post and the Athens Banner Herald and the AJC a bunch. And it really just sort of reserved to the fact that it was probably never going to happen because my career, went up to Kentucky and then down to Nashville and wasn't really ever considering coming back to Atlanta. And as you guys know, like jobs at the AJC don't come around too often. I mean, Ken been on the beat for 13 years and he just switched over to a columnist. I mean, Chip Towers covering Georgia's been doing it forever. I mean, guys and girls who work there, they do it for a long time. There's not a lot of openings or absences. So for that to sort of, fall into my lap, for lack of a better term, was pretty amazing. And to think, like you said, I was a kid reading the paper. I have framed AJCs down here in my basement right now, and to have my byline in that paper is pretty outstanding.
So did you move back to Atlanta then, or are you still up in Nashville?
Oh, no, we moved back May 31st. Technically, I started at the AJC in the middle of May, but didn't really start reporting until, that first week of June. We moved down here May 31st, found a house in Smyrna. We're down the street from the ballpark, which was really cool.
Nice.
Just didn't really plan it that way. It's the way it happened. Like I said, moved down here May 31st and had our second son June 15th. So we're trying to cram as many life events as possible into one crazy summer.
Sounds like you're doing a good job of it.
Thank you. And then the other kid starts kindergarten on Tuesday. So let's just keep going. Let's see what else can happen, right?
Incredible run right here.
Historic stretch.
Sounds like you got to cap it with like a conference title or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
I should get myself a ring. I need to order myself a ring.
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely. So looking forward to this athletic year, this football season, what are some of the parts you're really excited about covering?
Well, personally, from a personal standpoint, I've told a lot of people this, I haven't been to a lot of ACC locales. Like I spent a lot of time in the SEC and the Sun Belt and Conference USA when I used to cover Western Kentucky. So I've been, in the South and the Southeast and the Southwest. But, I've never been to Boston. I've never been to Pittsburgh. I've never been to Syracuse. I went to Clemson once for a basketball game when I was an undergrad, but I've never seen a football game there. So from a personal standpoint, I've never been to Wake Forest and UNC and Duke. I'm really excited and jacked up about seeing these towns, getting to eat at, some of these, cool restaurants and visit some breweries and then see some cool atmospheres I've never seen before, both football and basketball. From a journalism standpoint, I mean, let's see what Brent Key has, everybody saw what he did on an interim basis, but, I'm a new beat writer and there's a new head coach and I feel like we're kind of holding hands on this new journey together.
New basketball coach too.
Yeah. New basketball coach, new athletic director, a lot of newness going on. So anytime you have a first year coach, there's no shortage of storylines because there's going to be adversity. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be cool feature stories that come out. So it's really exciting, for me to be a part of that.
I should have worn my ESO Club shirt. I've got that with me right now, but that'd be at the top of my list for Clemson recommendations. But you got to head up there for a men's basketball game or baseball or softball or volleyball or something like that when it's not
anything,
80,000 people descending on the city. Because then you can go to the Smoking Pig and go to the ESO Club. I mean, you're going to be able to get into, He's Not Here or something like that in Chapel Hill, but there's a lot of good places out there. So you can eat your way around the conference and really never finish. I guess.
I will. I'm a big foodie and I love to, find cocktail bars and breweries and restaurants. And again, just there's a ton of places I haven't been. But, I also have a lot of good friends throughout the conference. I'm looking forward, there's a young man by the name of Zach Greenwell, who's the basketball SID at Louisville, and he's one of my longtime friends. We actually used to be journalists together in Bowling Green. So, I saw Rocco, the football SID at ACC kickoff. Jeff Brom, I used to cover him. So there's some people along the way that I've met that I'm looking forward to hanging out with too when I'm on the road.
Louisville's a great town. I'm not biased at all, but that's a great food town too. So,
oh yeah. I mean, been there many times living in Kentucky, and it's crazy that this worked out. That get to go back at least once a year every year.
Yeah, Absolutely. Chad, thank you again for your time. But before we let you go,
Mhm.
one question that's actually not on our shot sheet. I am going to
Uh-oh.
unfortunately force you to pick a side. Favorite restaurant in Atlanta?
Well, that's tough because I just moved back after being away for almost like 20 years. We frequent Nuevo Laredo a lot.
That's the right answer. That's
Ooh,
the right answer,
that
Chad.
is a
That's the
good
right
answer.
answer.
Very
We
Nothing
strong
actually
has changed
response.
about this answer.
where I think we're averaging one trip a week at this point, having only been living here for 2 months. We have
That is
yet
immaculate.
yeah, we've yet to explore really a whole lot. And I have a list. I keep a list on my phone. I'm one of those guys. Every time I see an
Yeah.
eater review or like, I keep the
Yep.
list. But I've been going to Nuevo Laredo a ton.
Okay. That
Yeah.
that I that we can work with, I think. That we can work with. All
Let,
right.
let's
Thank
let's
you so much
let's
for
reconvene. Hey, let's reconvene July 31st, 2024, and I'll have a new list and maybe a new favorite. So
Fantastic.
I don't want to offer Jack's hospitality here, but we can definitely get you on your way in terms of beers and foods. So
love it. I'll take it.
yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Well, Chad, thank you so much for your time. We're really looking forward to having you amongst our journalism corps this
All
year.
right,
So
guys. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
yeah. Have a good
absolutely.
one.
Take care.
See you out there.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we'll talk a little bit more about all of whatever is going on in Georgia Tech sports, which for once in the middle of the summer, there is actual news after this short break.
Honestly, I had some news or something that I wanted to mention earlier, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was. But I can remember that I do love Section 103. I take my Section 103 hoodies and crew necks with me basically wherever or whenever I go out of town or when I'm in town. It's a little too hot for that right now in Atlanta, so it might be a little bit odd to be plugging the long sleeve shirts. But you got to do what you got to do, and it's great stuff. We talked last week about player shirts being here. Order those now. You're not going to have those forever, and you're going to get your best pick of your size and navy white or gold. The sooner you get to that, take a look at that and get stocked up for this year. There certainly is more coming. If any options in the new poll are to be indicated, I will not bias the results. I've already submitted my poll, but a lot of great stuff out there. And as always, free shipping on orders over $70. Go check them out. Section 103. And I don't know if we mentioned this on the podcast, but their founder and chief Stephen Little, he's on the Tech 40 under 40. So a lot of great stuff that they're doing out there
This news.
in
This
the
is
tech
news. This is just
community
straight
as
news. This is
well.
not a
So,
pot. It's not an ad segment anymore. That's just actual
no,
news.
it's
The ad
news.
segment is news now.
I gotta come clean. I did also nominate Akshay, but I think Stephen is very deserving. So it's it's great to see, and he's doing great work, given everyone the products that they crave and they clamor for. And I'm excited to see those only continue to grow.
Gentlemen, let's get back to talking about some sports news, shall we? Let's round out a couple items before we really dig deep. In golf, Crystal Lamprecht is now ranked number two on the PGA Tour University ranking. So a really good finish to the summer for him. In men's tennis, Chris Eubanks and Andres Martin faced off last week. I believe that was Tuesday at the Atlanta Open. I think Eubanks made a nice, tidy little run. But in that match specifically, I believe it was a pretty straightforward 6-2, 6-4 outing for
Yes.
Eubanks over Martin. Jack, tell me more, please.
Wasn't there, but got some of the details here. They gave Martin, similar to last year, like a little mini parade before the match. Like last year, he rode the wreck into the match and everything like that. It was super cool. Um, Damon Stoudemire was the dignitary from the school that came. He did the ceremony of coin toss before the match to decide who would serve first and all that kind of stuff. And I imagine there was some core of the cheerleaders and things like that. There were some other pep spirit squad people. Akin to last year, Eubanks is now 32nd in the world rank, which is highest ranked Georgia Tech guy in an individual sport who's not named Crystal Lamprecht right now. So maybe. Well, no, that is
so
higher
many
than Christo's.
qualifiers for that one.
I was gonna say that
That is an
Christo
Elias
is not
Sports
37.
Bureau stat query.
Welcome
can
to
you just
where
call
we are.
him
Welcome to this
active
podcast.
goat?
Active,
but...
yeah, the active act. That's not a bad call. Yeah, no, he's coming off a great run. He will play. I think next time we'll check in on him is in about a month and a half or so after U.S. Open. So we'll see how that lands for him. He's going to be there for sure. He might have a seating, like a legit seating. He's going to have some more tune-ups because there's a big U.S. circuit before the U.S. Open actually happens. So he'll have some matches to elevate his ranking a little bit. I don't know how far. I haven't done that research, but good tidings so far between with Mr. Eubanks, and hey, we got a good night between him and Chris and Andres Martin too. So I'm sad Martin had to lose. That was the sucky part. Like one of them had to lose that night.
Yeah.
Well, the best part is that John Isner lost in the first round. So
that's all correct. And Taylor Fritz won the tournament, which is good for American tennis.
Akshay is fueled by haterade, and I respect that.
The most powerful motivator I found is spite.
Between that and copium, you can't really go wrong, right?
No, those are two of my main food groups, actually. I'm glad that we've had that conversation. One actual serious note on the Eubanks versus Martin. What is the word I'm looking for? Some of the pomp and circumstance around it. Damon Stoudemire was there doing the coin toss because Brent Key was at ACC kickoff. I think we had a question about that
right. Yes.
in our writer's room. The dates overlapped.
It was me. I'm honest, if I'm being honest.
I assume Mr. Key, Coach Key, would have done the coin toss had he been available. Alas, contractual obligations to the Atlantic Coast Conference call. Speaking of other obligations to the football program, Mr. Purdy, there was some interesting recruiting news that came across the wire earlier, I guess this weekend. I was going to say earlier this week, but it's Monday at 8 p.m.
Yeah, it was. Something like that.
Go for it.
I mean, we've still had people filtering in and just recruiting, just notifications popping in and out, stuff like that. But a big one we saw was Jonte Gilbert, who was originally committed to Ohio State. He's the number 2 safety out of Georgia for the class of 2025. So not this one that we've been actively recruiting and talking about recently, or we're actively recruiting 2025, but who's coming next year. He was committed to Ohio State. Decommitted on the day he was at Georgia Tech and visiting the place, which he had visited multiple times. Apparently South Carolina also is possibly is looking to be pretty strong in the loop here. But to say a guy that was at Georgia Tech decommitted from Ohio State, or that was at Georgia Tech at the day he got announced he decommitted from Ohio State, that's not nothing. And I mean, who knows? We still have a long way to go on this road. There is no promises here. There's no nothing. But I think that speaks a lot to the current administration is able to have this kind of sway right now and at least put up enough of a good story that things like this will happen. So
I've got to be honest. I have a point that I want to make that has nothing to do with this specific recruitment, but just the fact that we're talking about this on July 31st of 2025 potential recruits, I think shows that between the three of us, we're probably as high on football or as keyed in as we have been in a minute. We're talking about
keyed in. Boo.
We're going to use that so often during football season, man. We're going to use that one all the time. No shame.
Oh my God. I'm going to mandate that I edit all of them. I will take that time out of my weekends and I will cut it all.
Are you just going to start bleeping keyed in? People are going to think we're swearing or something, man. Come on.
I will, actually. This is a good bit. I'm going to keep this up.
It's a great bit.
No puns.
Please continue your actual point. I'm sure it was actually
you're right there, Jake.
Like, we love volleyball, but we started saying that we were Tech's #1 volleyball podcast for a reason, right? We weren't interested in talking about football. It was not sparking joy. To
be fair, volleyball was also very good.
They've been sparking a lot of joy.
They deserve the airtime, and they will get the airtime again this season, assuming they are right up at that same level. So,
yeah, but my point there being is like, I don't know. It seems like the vibes are high, and they should be. Like it's it's a fresh start, kind of like what Chad was saying. There's a lot of good coming in between Damon and Brent and Jay. Like there's a lot of new going on, and I think people are feeding off of that.
And as we mentioned beforehand in previous episodes, like this kind of stuff is great now, but still the season, it adds to how important this coming season is. That we don't need to run the table or anything like that, but to show that what's being promised, I don't want to say promise, but at least what's being shown off field right now will translate on field. There's so much writing on this right now, and people like this make a huge difference, at least internally and within the college football world. So kudos to Brent for getting us to this point this quickly too. Oh no, this quickly. It hasn't been long.
Yeah,
he has played. We've had 0 games with him as full-time permanent head coach, and now we got a name that doesn't, I would say, rival Calvin Johnson, but certainly would be one of the biggest ones since. So
him and Jameer and Calvin, right? So
yeah.
I think this leads us to an interesting topic of conversation, especially with some of the more recent news items. You make a really good point that this next few years is a really pivotal time, for Georgia Tech in pivotal, I think also technically applies, but pivotal time for Georgia Tech as the college athletics landscape shifts. Right. I think we've seen even recently a lot more conference realignment starting to take shape. Colorado is now part of the Big 12 again. That's current as of literally this time next year. They will. So the Pac-12 is now down to 9. I'm sure there's other sand shifting beneath people's feet out west as well. And also, you're looking at a bunch of different media rights deals being renegotiated, right? The Big 12 redid theirs earlier this year. Pac-12, Pac-9, whatever the hell you want to call it, still does not have one. We'll talk about that in a bit. But and the ACC, is locked into its long-term agreement with ESPN until 2036. So you have the two powers at the top. You have 3 or 4 conferences right sandwiched in the middle, and then the other 4 just kind of exist below that. It's become an increasingly tiered structure, and as those 2 giants at the top start sucking up more and more of the media rights oxygen and also the media rights dollars, which I think also cannot be lost here, it remains to be seen who moves up into that tier without, the soccer promotion and relegation. We're not going to get into that. But it remains to be seen who gets pulled up into that tier to come along for the ride. And I think that's where this period becomes so pivotal. Goddamn. Pivotal for Georgia Tech.
Episode title.
Pivotal for Georgia Tech. Man, come on.
Pivotal for Georgia Tech in setting themselves up for success as this conference realignment cycle continues to turn and turn and turn. I think the first stage of where we should go with this is talking about Colorado. I guess we weren't really around for the golden age of Colorado and its 5th down nonsense, but I think Colorado as a media entity is fundamentally in 2023 is also fundamentally different from Colorado as a media entity in 2022.
It's fundamentally different than it was in 20. Yeah, come on. Like
that's what I said.
No.
The Dion effect.
You didn't let me finish. Yeah. You didn't let me finish the sentence.
I already had a point in my mind, and I was gonna say it, and I realized it when the words were already out of my mouth, and that's on me.
Yeah. So it's fundamentally different from 2022, and it's obviously fundamentally different from 1990. So I think this is a good place to start as a test case for something that we were talking about in the early part of the offseason, right? What does that kind of effect from a single megalomaniac, to put it politely, have on a school's immediate media future? I think, Jake, you already said you had a point here coming up, so I want to give you the floor first.
I don't know. I just don't know if this happens without significant influence from the personality that they've hired as their head coach. And I wonder kind of with how much interest that there was in Atlanta circles, not necessarily tech, and national circles, again, not necessarily tech, to hire Dion, if what that would look like in terms of, what if he came to tech? Would there be that impetus? Because it doesn't seem like Colorado was all that displeased. 8 months, maybe something's different 8 months ago. We just don't know. And this bubbles it up to the surface. But, recruiting Texas, a place that Dion has roots, and obviously now knowing what the Pac-12 deal is, or at least the numbers that have been theoretically tossed around. I mean, it makes sense that they're trying to get some of that cash and go back to what, brought them success, recruiting Texas and all that. But I have to wonder how much the personality effect of the guy in charge of football is driving the ship. Obviously, football coaches don't always make administrative decisions, but this certainly seems to be an interesting edge case. And I'm sure that there'll be a great or interesting feature at some point in terms of, I don't know. I miss the old oral histories that like Grantland and stuff used to do, where it'd just be like, okay, I'm going to sit down for 2 hours and read this, 20,000 word long essay, because this seems like a great some great fodder for that. I don't know. I feel like that was something that existed last time conference realignment went nuts in like 2012. But
contextually here too, like it's so much more doable for Colorado to do anything crazy, because talk about of the Power 5 schools that had nothing left to lose, it's them. Like they were the school on that they were the exact definition of that. So they were much more willing, and for good reason, to throw a bone to Dion and see what would happen. And for him personally, I would think this is as terms of just a personal project for him and a way to definitely prove himself even more. If climbing the coaching ranks is something he desires, I don't know if that's the case or not, but like it was a better marriage for him, I would say, than coming to us would be. Yes, we were down on the toilet too at the time, and that keep in mind, neither Georgia Tech or Colorado has gotten out of that toilet yet. We haven't played any games to prove that these concepts are working between Brent and Dion. So there's still a lot of most of this book is still to be written. Like most of this oral history is not done yet.
Jack, did you see
the John Blas video about this in 25 years is going to be incredible when it's done, but we need about 10 years of history to work itself out still.
I don't know if you say his name as French as that was. Also, the history of the Minnesota
John
Vikings
Boyce
comes out.
Boys.
It comes out tomorrow, but today by the time this is released. But anyway, Jack, I was going to say, have you? Yes, free ads. He works for Vox Media. This is a Vox Media podcast, Akshay. But Jack, I was going to ask if you'd seen Dan Lanning's quote from earlier today.
I have not.
Essentially, Dan Lanning, Oregon head coach, was essentially like, what have they given to the conference? Yeah. Like in the entire time they've been here? Like it seems like
fair. Yeah.
At least from a competitive perspective, basketball and football. I mean, they don't have a baseball team. I'd shame on me. I don't know if they have softball. Obviously they have women's basketball and men's basketball, but I mean, Colorado, not even on a football field. They haven't really done anything, period. Like they cut their swim program. What have they brought to the Pac-12? I mean, not that much, right?
And I mean, you
I do want to
kind of hit. Well, before you go, Jack, I that raises a more cultural dissonance point, right? You mentioned that they don't offer some of those programs that schools that are more culturally in line with the Pac might have. Like Stanford offers everything from like wrestling, water polo, baseball, softball, right? They have the full gamut. So Oregon and Washington, I'm sure, are also similarly fully featured. But you have Colorado, which has been effectively mid-table in football, mid-table or worse in basketball, if I remember my standings correctly. And hold on, you're making a face.
I am making a face. I just learned something.
Do they have a baseball team?
No, they don't have a baseball team. That I knew. Do you know how many men's sports they offer? One of which is not even, I believe, an NCAA sport. I'm
looking at this list as well.
Yes. Colorado has football.
Sports?
They have football, basketball, golf, track and field, cross country, and skiing. That's like
skiing is not an NCAA sport.
We talk about Tech having a very limited program, and then on the women's side, basketball, cross country, golf, lacrosse, skiing, soccer, tennis, track and field, volleyball. Like we talk about Tech having a light program. This is 9 plus 6. They only have 15 sports. They have 15 sports. That has to be if it's not the NCAA minimum, and 2 of those 15 sports are skiing. Like I don't know. The more I look into it, I don't know. That the Pac-12, they're usually sponsoring a lot of sports, and Colorado was not competing in a lot of them and not bringing a lot to the table in the ones they were there in. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it was a weird cultural fit to begin with, even in 2012, that cycle. And obviously hindsight is 2020, and but it makes you think about what the value really was to the Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-9, what have you, when they wanted to expand in the first place. I mean, if you're going back to our traditional theorems on how conference realignment happens, especially in the the early 2010s, that was a TV market move, right? Yeah. Colorado gives you Denver, like how Rutgers allegedly gives you New York, gives a Big Ten New York, and how Maryland allegedly gives the Big Ten DC, right? Those are sort of the dominoes that are falling at that period, at that point. Yeah. Now it's just about raw eyeballs and regardless of whether that's streaming or TV or what have you. It's just raw fan base size. Right. And we don't really care about Denver as a media market, but we care about Denver in terms of what schools make up schools alumni make up that area. And it's possible that Colorado feels like those alumni have more of a connection to the Big 12 than the Pac-12.
Yeah, that's totally possible.
I don't doubt that at all. I'm just, and this is partially my own self-realization in the last 10 minutes of Googling on the side, but I don't know. Obviously, Colorado's a value add for the Big 12 on some level, but I don't know. It's not like they were going crazy in the Pac-10, Pac-12, Pac-9, whatever. Stop naming your conferences with a number.
Stop putting the damn number in there. Stop putting the number in there.
We do got to get rid of numbers.
I've been having Pac-10, Pac-12, Pac-9, ... doom and gloom in my head because, I want the West Coast to have a functioning league, but I mean, your Stanford, your Cal, your Oregon, and your Washington are going to bring a lot more. Your Oregon State, even, like you're going to bring a lot more to the table than Arizona basketball, but at least they all have something
right now.
Yeah,
Colorado
it's
right
not
now
a model athletic like profile, right? And that I think that's the big difference, Jack, is what I'm trying to say versus Texas and Oklahoma and USC and UCLA. 4 of Texas is in the mix for the Directors Cup every year. Oklahoma, I mean, they were in Omaha a couple of years ago. They've had great basketball and football teams recently. They have an
effective stranglehold program on the sport of softball.
Mm-hmm. You've got USC and UCLA. I mean, between the two of them, how many NCAA titles do they have? Like 1 million? Like it just feels like
most
a very different move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a power vacuum coming in the Big 12 too, which Colorado, if this Dion thing works, is very poised to fill in. He's pushing the envelope everywhere. I mean, yes, a football coach has a lot of sway relative to probably his peers in any given athletic department, but for an athletic department that only funds 15 individual sports, if you count men and women separately, which is one more than Tech right now, a whole one more. That's a lot. I have to imagine Dion was championing this hugely for a long time. I could tell the Pac-12 was just not going to cut it for them, and they weren't going to be competitive. I would certainly prefer to play, instead of playing Washington, Oregon, and all those guys, I'd certainly prefer to play like Cincinnati and UCF and Houston. There's wins. Those are wins right there. Like, that's not nothing.
Oh, I disagree.
I don't know if I agree with that
at all.
Right. I mean,
you're going up against
it's a crazy town.
I mean, if you said
You can
Kansas,
lose any
maybe,
day of
but
the week right
since
now.
Cincinnati, UCF,
Any day of the week.
and I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'll believe it when I see something
It's a
happen in Boulder,
hodgepodge
but this
conference.
isn't yeah.
No.
It
It is
it
a
is.
hodgepodge conference.
And if they had UConn, it'll be even hodgepodgeier. If they had San Diego State,
Yeah.
it'll be even more hodgepodge.
I did want to mention though, on just like my point I was getting to about Dion running the ship here more is that, to bring it back to Tech, like that was not like that kind of attitude and that not attitude, but that kind of just probably path he wanted to go to make a bigger name for Dion wasn't going to work at Tech. I don't think there would have been a much bigger culture clash than I think we maybe would have anticipated. He probably would have gotten Rain to do some things, but we all know what just happened in the last 4 years, where it just would have felt. I think there was just too much of a reaction that was going to happen
Yeah.
negatively if he showed up and tried to push the envelope too far, and then would have gotten frustrated by the fact you can't really move out of the ACC right now without ESPN saying you're free to go, and the other
Yeah.
ACC schools saying you're free to go. Now maybe Dion shows up and he gives us he's more leveraged negotiating wise. Who the heck knows?
Yeah.
That's all hypothetical right now, and maybe there's some upside there that we won't get. But all that to say,
I
we got to
I
play
will
the
steal
games.
a Twitter.
We're still going to play the games.
I was going to say I will steal a Twitter bit from various online reporters. But the mission of resetting the conferences to what they are in 1995 just took a big step forward. So,
yeah,
that's something. But then again, Colorado's going back to a conference that doesn't have Nebraska in it and won't have Oklahoma, and those are two, and Missouri, and those are three of the Big Eight. Like that's. I don't know. It's going to look different.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of like, you get rid of those three schools and you got Coastal Chaos coming to the Big 12. Like, it's going to be weird. It's going to be weird. They're going to win more games. They're going to win more games because they're going to have a lower average of quality opponent.
But also enjoy going to Morgantown. Like that's a long trip.
Is it better than going to Washington State? Maybe. Maybe.
Who's to say?
They have equally the amount of stuff to do, honestly. But let's try to pivot this in a more Tech direction, at least as it pertains to media rights, because we've seen a little bit of how the Pac-12 is going to do their new media deal. I think the last report was from Jeff Swartz, who provided a very brief summary that was $20 million a year per team and a mostly streaming model. My thought on this is that this is perfectly fine. This is probably what you expected for the nine brands that are left. They constantly get made fun of by the rest of the country, as we have done for the past 20 minutes. They probably should not care about what anyone else thinks. Whatever money is being handed to them by any sort of party, they should just take it and move on. They're still an autonomy conference. They still have all of the rights afforded to them by the NCAA as an autonomy conference, and they're still part of the CFP. None of it matters. Just take the $20 million. Most of you are not hurting for money other than like Washington State. So keep that in. That's my side of it.
Cal got a lot of debt.
Well, Cal's debt is its own problem, but like it's not. They're not like losing money on their athletic department year over year.
Just a really expensive stadium renovation.
Expensive.
Who's to say?
It's either that or it's Cal Santa Clara instead of Cal Berkeley. So it could have gone either way. But Jack, I know we talked about this a little bit in our writers' room, so I want to make sure that you're able to get a tackle in here.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing more, definitely more about this media deal, because I've watched enough. I'm enough of a sports sicko that, like, yeah, if there's a Pac-12 game, I can for once watch it's like at 4:00 in the afternoon. There's somehow not a competing game that matters to me. They're like, I'll watch it because how often? I used to live in Seattle. I feel like I have some ties to Washington and the Huskies and all that. So, like, I want to see them when I can, but at the same time, like, I also want to watch games that matter. A round robin of 8 teams feels light at least they keep their biggest names outside of the ones that are leaving, or they still have notable games like what the Washington Oregon game is. That's a big game every year. Like that determines a lot of the future of the pack in any given season is that particular game. Stanford in the Stanford Washington game, if Stanford's good in the Stanford Oregon game, if those three teams are doing it, it's a big time. That's a big time group of three games right there.
I
but
mean,
it's spotty right now.
The true round robin though is I mean that you can go back to a double round robin in basketball. I mean, that's extremely classic college sports energy right there. I mean, yeah, the Pac-10 for a long time, but it was also the Pac-8 for a long time. And I mean, with 8 members, them in the Big Ten with 10 built the Rose Bowl into probably the most prized.
They did. They've done
in amateur sports, like
historically is there, but then again, they weren't working with media rights deals at the scale they were now. Mm-hmm. Was probably the big
period.
Here.
They weren't working with media rights.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here. You look what's happened totally. in interest on the West Coast, and it's you're not going to get the same magnitude because like the reason they built like California Memorial Stadium and Stanford Stadium to be as big as they were in the heyday or whatever is because they were selling 60, 70, 80,000 tickets to those games, and they're just not anymore. That's why USC cut the LA Memorial Coliseum down from the size it was. Granted, chair back seats are nice, but it's just different.
They also had to host NASCAR. You just can't miss a NASCAR race.
Don't understand why they do that.
So did the city of Chicago, but that's a different podcast,
That's totally different.
This Chicago street race, other than for the fact that it poured, seemed like a good idea at the time.
And some guy who won that race who had never done a NASCAR race ever in his life. So, that was fun.
Really?
Yeah, I'm still.
I didn't even watch. I wasn't around. So, but
also, I mean, as with MLS, and actually, I know that to talk about this on the side, and other times, like the streaming only deal could be something that while the number may not be big enough, who knows if that gets you more access to your games too? If it's going to be easier to watch the Pac-12 that way, to have it merge with the rest of your streaming services and stuff like that, or however you want to do it, like. The last time I had Pac-12 Network Pac-10 Network was when it was an SD channel in the sports package on Comcast, which meant it was unwatchable because who watches standard definition after 2009, and it was late as heck. So maybe this gives them more flexibility. I don't know.
MLS games were basically in standard definition until last year. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
You're right. I mean, yeah. And then also, like, nationally, though, like, I want these teams to compete for titles and stuff like that. Like, it matters that they're good. I don't want crappy Rose Bowl games where Wisconsin's just going to beat whoever by 30 every year, or not Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan State, any of those.
Iowa's not going to score 30, points, buddy.
No.
That would get Brian Ferentz extended, and we just can't have that.
So, yeah, I mean, I want to see these schools do well. Because I think it makes for a better college football experience. And if it's not going to consolidate, if they're not willing to consolidate to the point where we can effectively reset all of this, then at least be good. Go get San Diego State. Maybe go get Nevada. Maybe go get UNLV. I mean, UNLV kind of sucks and everything, but
Boise.
Just get some. Yeah, Boise. Boise State would be great.
Wyoming.
They won't get Boise. They will. Here's the problem.
North Dakota State. Go get North Dakota State. Be the people. Be the conference that does this and gets them into the FBS, because we have waited too damn long. We have waited too damn long to get North Dakota State into this.
Unfortunately, we do have to mention the AAU and also the Pac-12. I'm not going to call it the Pac-12. The Pacific Athletic Conference cares about its academic reputation more than most. So arguably the most out of the 5 major conferences, with the Big Ten coming in a honestly kind of distant second in comparison.
They all came there to play school.
There is no, we are adding North Dakota State or even Boise, because they are not good at school or as good at school as these other schools are. And that becomes, regardless of how we think of this in an athletic context, when you talk about conferences that are not only athletic groupings, but also academic research conferences in like the original physical, literal sense of the word, that becomes a factor, and everyone has a sense of pride. in
I
that
get
level
that.
of reputation.
I get that we're Louisville homers now, but that's why it took them so long to be considered for membership in the conference too. I mean, that was not something that they took lightly. And that, I mean, they've got a medical school and a dental school. Like it's not, you know,
They ain't
I don't
nothing.
know. This is the ACC, and then you got the Big Ten, and like the Pac-10's at the top of that heap. So
Were we supposed to talk
terms of
about
There
the
is
ACC in this whole
playing
bit, and we
school.
just kept talking about
Yes,
the
no.
Pac-12?
I'm turning this. I'm trying to pivot on this because that streaming bit becomes really curious to me. But as an MLS fan, and as a sports media person, or someone interested in sports media and sports business, that streaming bit becomes really interesting as a model to follow because you know that at a certain level, the PAC's member
Let's just call
leadership
it the Pac.
committee is
Let's just
looking
call
at
it the
that.
Pac. It's just the Pac.
The PAC's leadership committee is looking at that streaming deal that MLS has, or even some of the ESPN Plus kind of deals that are available, and they're saying, "Look, we can get our games out of the failed state of the Pac-12 network and in front of people. We don't care about the actual number of watchers. We know that those raw numbers are going to naturally be lower than anyone else at the top division in our market. So why don't we just put everything on streaming, have a market off of our tier one games that go on ESPN and Fox, but the rest of it is behind streaming. And like you had alluded to before, Jack, keep the rest of the games on streaming for the sickos that will pay for a sub, regardless of whether that is a share of the ESPN Plus sub, regardless of whether that is Pac-12 season pass, XYZ, right?
Something.
If you want to watch the Pac-12, you are either a right coast college football sicko, or you live on the West Coast and you want to watch your team.
Or went
There
there.
is a level of balkanization here, right? So focus on committing to your diehard fans, make your money off of them, and then you'll also get whatever casuals that are watching every game every weekend, right? But don't worry about trying to please Heisman voters on the East Coast if they historically haven't cared about you anyway, right? That's the comparison here.
And the point there is too, like if you think about it, they have, especially your Bay Area schools, Washington, Oregon, increasingly the Arizona schools have fan bases that are alumni bases that are large and they spread out, right? I mean, and that's something that we see and had issues with the ACC distribution there and Raycom and whatnot. So just getting those eyeballs in front of your core constituency, I think Akshay's point there is super valid. So,
and I think to actually tie this back to the ACC, I mean, it brings in a couple of things that we've talked about. We've talked about how those top two conferences are taking up not only media oxygen, but also media dollars. So what if the ACC also moves to a similar model, right? ESPN says, we don't want to pay out the rest of your deal. Find Sinclair or whomever, build yourself a streaming package. We will give you the money to buy out your portion of the contract for the next 16 years, your grant of rights, whatever, rip it up, do whatever. But all of your games for football or your like Duke, North Carolina basketball games are now all bundled into this one streaming package where you don't have to, if you don't want to subsidize watching the rest of those, if you don't care about the other two big conferences, now all you have to do is pay for ACC season pass, right? Like that model. Yeah, go for it.
This makes a lot of sense if you're paying attention to the Hollywood stuff and what Bob Iger is doing in terms of cost savings at Disney right now as well. Some renege or some rework of this grant of rights deal, if Bob Iger looks enough into it and sees this as a way to save money, ESPN might come to the table too. Which if they do,
I'm of two minds.
I'm
of two minds of that though. Like honestly, you have the PAC or the ACC for ESPN is actually all considered, considering what else they're paying for, is a pretty good deal. They're getting UNC basketball, UNC Duke basketball inventory. They're getting Syracuse basketball inventory, whatever. like what have you.
They're getting Florida State softball or Louisville volleyball. Like you're getting some of the marquee programs in that second tier of sports behind football and men's and women's basketball. I mean, you're getting, and even in women's basketball, you're getting Virginia Tech basketball and NC State, and like you're getting some of the best properties out there. I mean, it's not.
And at the very least, you're also getting Florida State, Clemson, and Miami for whatever that's worth football, right? Like you're getting the brands that you want at a pretty high value per dollar.
Georgia Tech.
But at a high level of stability right now too, which is a massive part. The stability of this.
So
now, I think after the last week looks a lot better than it did previously.
So that begs the question: if you're Bob Iger, do you send your crony to go renegotiate this deal if you know that you're only paying on average about $350 million or $35 million per year per team for the foreseeable future for at least the next 13 years? Or do you try to, like you did with Texas and Oklahoma, you tried to move some chess pieces around so that you're now only paying for the bottom tier of I think they still have a bit of the Big Ten rights. You take some of those, and then you have your entire SEC package with maybe Clemson, Florida State, Miami, what have you, after you've moved your chess pieces around. I think it's I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of individual valuations, but you could put these, like either of those two plans from a financial perspective are legitimate, right?
Well, it's also the, to borrow a question from Matt Brown from Extra Points' Athletic Director Simulator 3000, there's one in there about a coach having a successful year and asking to renegotiate a deal. One of the options is the deal's the deal and you signed it. Like pay up or don't. Like those are their options. It's not like they can just be like, oh, we're deciding not to, because then Jim Phillips and the rest of the smart folks in the ACC are going to be like, all right, time to sue you. And then we get to the end all be all of the only thing that's undefeated in college sports is billable hours. Like, come on.
I don't think they're going to go as far as to like ESPN. I don't think we'll go as far as to just stop paying. Like they know that this is now going to be a much better deal down the line. Yeah, that's not happening. But I mean, it's good to play out the scenario. Like I'd like to still play it out. But
that's why I said it. I'm playing out the scenario, boys.
I mean, look, like the only way that the ACC can renegotiate their grant of rights and their TV deal in general, is to change their membership. So that is the only way that the ACC initiates that conversation. The only reason for ESPN to initiate that conversation, well, there are two, but the most realistic one is we want to save money and cut your deal, which the ACC is not going to agree with. They're going to say we had a deal and you signed it. Like
they say pound sand. Like
yeah. So either ESPN, go for it.
This begs the question for me. Add UConn?
No, I would say no. I don't think the basketball value outweighs the non-football value.
Then you have
and also
every year on both sides. Every year you have
Syracuse,
you have
UConn.
all of the North Carolina schools, and UConn you have the next best basketball
and you have
brand
the old Big East
added.
Yeah,
Syracuse UConn is a serious rivalry, but see UConn, and this is what is blowing my mind about all these rumors. UConn just did the fan-friendly, clamored for thing in leaving this league in which they have a bunch of no association. Obviously, there's more association with the ACC.
It never did sense. Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense for Wichita State either. And that's another podcast topic. But they just did the thing and went back to the Big East. And yes, Creighton wasn't in the old Big East, but they're playing Villanova and they're playing Georgetown and they're playing St. John's and Providence. And those are what their fans were
names.
Like, please.
True. It was a
realignment win. Arguably, Colorado could be. They're going back to playing Kansas State and Kansas and Oklahoma State and all that. But it's the one like, oh, they did the right thing. And their fans, from everything I've heard, they're all over that. Like why would they undo that? And if you're the ACC and you want to add one, obviously like you kind of got to pry them out. But like I don't know, West Virginia seems a lot more natural of of that and force Notre Dame somehow to join the conference. But this is me playing forum poster more than anything close to journalism. Like, I don't
seemed
know.
like the
UConn was just such a win,
Yeah, in my head, it was like, okay, this is actually maybe a palatable option if you're going to add a team to then be the reason we can redo this grant or rights deal somehow.
But again, like you have to, it comes down to those two things for me, right? Why does the ACC want to come to the table, and why would ESPN want to come to the table in order to renegotiate that deal? There's obviously the streaming future and everything is possible if ESPN finds their way out of that deal, but that future looks probably, if ESPN starts meddling, looks a lot more like the Pac-12's current and immediate future than it does like a traditional direct TV model, not direct TV the brand, but like TV linear model, right?
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting thought exercise to say, like, okay, well, you can add these teams, but like fundamentally, if you're adding teams, then there's been some sort of TV network meddling that has encouraged a conference to add teams and increase their payout, right? You can't get those 14 schools to agree on alignment without there being a bigger pot to split.
I can't help but think if they had just allowed the NCAA to negotiate a TV deal 40 years ago, rather than having it fall to the conferences, none of this would have happened in the first place.
Well, that's also literally against antitrust law, to be fair.
Yeah,
like Oklahoma and Georgia versus NCAA, fundamentally a good ruling.
Yep.
The after effects of it have been unintended and extremely negative to a certain extent.
Yeah. But at some extent, don't you need, like, MLB has an antitrust exemption? Wouldn't it make sense for the NCAA to have that too? But we're getting down.
We're getting into
it's the end of summer. We're about to talk about real sports again, and I cannot wait. But
we're so close. I'll mention, at least for Tech, I mean, just in terms of this move the needle for us, maybe. We just hashed out again all the things about the creator rights and how as extremely rock solid this is right now, and related relative to everybody else is even more rock solid right now too, in terms of a stable deal that everyone included can count on working, unless I don't know, what if this, here's the only party that can truly break this, the Saudis.
No, I'm not even going
live
to
college
respect
football.
that.
I don't want anything. I don't want that to happen.
That's just Texas A&M, my guy.
Texas A&M brought to you by Saudi Aramco.
They literally have I guess they have a Qatar branch, but that's neither here nor there. But all that to
say, Tech is pretty much in the same spot they were in last week after all this.
There's no change to the ACC, but I think there are threads here that you can pull at, right? I hope that our discussion has spurred some sort of thought or been productive to where you can sort of see that there is some sort of material impact that can come up of the Pac-12 changing its conference membership and the media rights deal that it's about to sign. I think there are threads there that clearly relate to the ACC.
I get that the Big 12 is only going to be at 13. I say only. They're going to be at 13 with the addition of Boulder. But like at some point, getting bigger and bigger and bigger conferences just dilutes the opportunity you have to say, hey, we just won a thing, because conference championships are what a lot of programs can judge their worth by. I get it. There's a lot of at-larges, and basically the entire SEC softball gets into the tournament, and most of ACC women's basketball and what have you. But oh man, I don't know. Like it seems like those things become fewer and far between, especially, if you're Texas, a historically strong program, and you have Directors Cup top to bottom, you're going to be competing with a lot bigger fish in a lot of sports. I don't know. That's got to move the needle at least somewhat.
We'll have some fun test cases in 2025 and 2026 when we play a home and home with Colorado.
Yeah. I say what I say to set myself up for the trivia bit of the week. If we've exhausted all of our rambling about realignment. So we've talked about the historical results bit. I also keep a table of titles for the ACC. It works, it functions. I love that. And gents, I've got a couple slightly related questions. In the past, we've talked about how Boston College is particularly at the bottom end of that success spectrum, if you will. Prior to this most recent athletic year, they had only won one conference title. That was in men's soccer. It was about 15 years ago. But now they have a women's lacrosse title to go with it. They are still, according to my math, about 41 titles below expectations if they were to just win an even share of 1/15 of a women's basketball title every year. So not great, but it does mean that they've won 2 titles. There's one other school that's pretty close to them in terms of active ACC membership, but they've been around 10 fewer years. Can you guess what this school is that only has 3 + 1 shared conference titles since moving to the ACC?
Your answers or possible answers are limited to what? Syracuse, Pittsburgh, and Louisville,
And Notre Dame.
and Notre Dame. Oh, right. Notre Dame they switched from the Big Ten in 15.
Big East, but yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah.
I kind of like the Notre Dame option actually because they had those couple women's basketball titles, and then
They do have a
random
shared
may have
regular
popped in there.
season, I'm pretty sure.
There we
So-
go. I think I'm going to land on Notre Dame.
Notre Dame's won 14 fencing titles between the men and the women. That's 14 of the
God, what?
26 they've won since they
What
got
the
here.
hell?
Yeah,
Whatever.
they've basically
Whatever,
won
man.
every ACC fencing title except for maybe like 2,
Are
I
they
think,
playing
total
anybody?
combined.
Do they win that by default? Like, do you have anyone
It's
else
like
that
a
does this?
4-team tournament, so they're really just racking them up. Let's see. Has
No.
anyone else won that? Let's see. Men's fencing. Clemson has one from the 80s. Duke has 2. Maryland has 1. You can see when they previously sponsored it was a very long time ago. UNC has 8. So yeah, they sponsored it briefly in the 80s and then brought it back in like 2014. The correct answer is Pitt. Pitt has 3.5,
Okay.
1 football title, 2 volleyball outright, and a shared volleyball title. So good luck to them. That is your similarly snake-bitten school. UNC, of course, is at the top. Obviously, they have 281.5 titles. They're 103 more than you'd expect if they just won an even share every year since 1953 in every sport. A name we often think with UNC is Duke. They're sitting at actually 33 under what we would expect, which I thought was interesting. All this to say, their Tobacco Road brethren,
I'm okay with that.
NC State, interestingly, often thought of as kind of the definition of perfectly mediocre, is sitting at exactly 0.7 titles above expectation. So the more you know. Conference realignment works out for some. Notre Dame, you got a big shiny fencing trophy for the last 7 years straight. But I updated this tool today, and I think the most interesting thing I learned was Clemson won the men's outdoor track and field title this year. The team that was supposed to be like cut because of the realignment, and then they successfully, actually, did they go all the way to court with their Title IX suit?
Yes.
No? Well,
They went to court, and I'm pretty sure the court ruled that they had to put it back.
Well, it worked out for them because
Amazing.
they won the track and field outdoor title this very year. Just for some Tech perspective, Tech has competed 698 ACC sport seasons. Most of the first 15 years were pretty bleak, and then they really stabilized up until about 2015, and we've kind of inched down since then. So winning 2 titles in the same year would do a lot for our trend year over year. Tech has 45.5 total. We've won 6.5% of all seasons in which we've competed, which is okay. About mid for the ACC. We would have expected to have 70.88 all time. I think that rounds me out. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. The NC State one though feels pretty on brand for them. There are a lot of not football and not men's and women's basketball titles in there though. I guess more women's of late, but it's very much well documented how they have not won baseball and football in about 30 years. So I thought that was interesting. Do you have any questions you want to ask about this tool before we put it away for another full year and look at it next summer?
No, I got nothing, unfortunately.
There's only so much change, I guess. I mean, yeah, I guess was there any interesting change year over year? I assume we're sitting pretty much the same. We only got our one in golf, so.
I'd say Boston College was the interesting one. Florida State actually had a relatively unsuccessful year. They are the second most successful active program in the conference. You had UNC, who's way above everyone else, and then Maryland, who, they haven't been in the conference in 10 years, but they won like every anymore, title the first 30 years the conference existed. Then Florida State, but yeah, Boston College not losing everything. That was pretty interesting. And yeah, no, UVA was, I don't know, the conception of Wake Forest as being a little bit underfunded for a long time is valid. They are the lowest performer relative to expectations, but it's interesting to see that their current point in terms of 1953 to now is where UVA bottomed out at in like 2001, and UVA's really been on the rise the last 20 years. So you can change your fortunes in terms of general athletic department health. And I think this is kind of a good metric for, if you smooth these numbers out over 5 or 10 years, just kind of what trend you've been having. But, we can see some flash in the pan stuff in there too. I think Virginia Tech's men's basketball title, based on their regression this year, is a pretty obvious outlier in terms of, hey, like, you can win one, and who knows if it happens next year. I'm sure UNC will go back to winning women's lacrosse, and Boston College, may not be so lucky, but maybe we'll talk about this in a year and be like, wow, they've won 2 in a row.
I'm vacationing outside of Providence right now, so I feel like I should have asked some Ivy League related, like, give me what Brown's done in the last while. But
this is just ACC. I don't have the time to digitize all the Ivy League too. But
Brown does not win that much. I actually do know this because my mom's a Princeton grad, so we follow the good Ivy League sports.
Nice,
like rowing.
Well, speaking of other ACC schools
and basketball.
If they make those Tequila Sunrise jerseys come up, I declare that we'll be a Louisville podcast for a week. But Louisville softball.
Do you want to walk out why? Just for the class.
We can do the story. We can do this.
Yeah, we have time for one story.
No, I got reached out to after we introduced that as a throwaway line. I won't say by who, but might not be in the it is. We will be a Louisville podcast for a week, I promise.
Well, your promise is a little bit hollow considering I usually edit these, so keep that in mind.
We post a 30-second episode that's just the intro music and the outro music, and it's just that. Those are at least a minute long, not just 30 seconds. Give me a little bit more credit with how sloppy I am usually. But Akshay just bleeps the whole thing out.
Oh, God,
no discussion of baseball bats and horse racing. None.
Or bourbon. Just to round out a couple of items from the last couple of weeks. The volleyball schedule is out. We mentioned that last week. We'll have a preview coming up before they start their season. They are on the road to start the year for the first couple of weeks. I don't think they play a home game until the the McCamish game, or the McCamish rivalry game. So
that weekend, that weekend's a bunch of teams. If you want to see them before the season starts, they do have their white and gold game on August 13th. So that's just the inter squad game.
They scrimmage Auburn too, don't they?
And Auburn, yes, they play Auburn the next weekend on the 19th. So those will be your games.
To be clear, they do not play a regular season actual non-exhibition game until the 20th of August.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. Football preview also we'll have something on that a little bit more substantive soon in just over a month. I guess a month plus 3 hours we will have actual sports to talk about, which is pretty fun.
How about that?
Labor Day weekend is surprisingly not that far away. So we will keep you posted with anything else happening in the Georgia Tech sports universe. To close us out, before we get to our usual outro, Mr. Purdy, you have in here that you have been in Rhode Island for the past couple of days on vacation. Please
This would have been
tell us all about it.
this would have made more sense at the top when we were like, like asking how like our lives were doing and stuff like that. But no, I mean, if you haven't been to the Newport Folk Fest, which is very impossible to get into because there's very, very limited tickets out there, and it sells out the date that tickets are announced before any artists are announced. It is the greatest time. It is my favorite music festival. It is the a reason I will always get up in the morning is because I know something about this festival is going to be related to my life at some point. So I got the pleasure to work there for three festivals, and I got to go again this year after 5 years of not being there. I got to see Jack Antonoff play, I got to see Lana Del Rey play, and it's a great place to discover artists. So if you're in the discovering music business, if you just want to go look at the Newport Folk Fest lineups of years past, you will find so many happy hours in front of you. That is why I'm in Rhode Island, so I could be there. So it's a great time. Definitely go. That's just a personal pitch of just, live a good life out there. Go to Rhode Island, have fun, go see the ocean.
Why would I see the ocean when I can go to Lake Lanier?
Oh my God.
What fun
Beautiful,
is it? What fun is
breezy
a body of water?
Lake Lanier.
What fun is a body of water without a inherent risk
river
of
where
death?
I can see the Providence River right now, and it wants to punch you in the face so hard right now.
Yes, but look, if the river was intending to punch me in the face, that wouldn't even be half of the risk of death afforded by Lake Lanier. Look, you got to meet me.
This is true. This is true. Don't go to Lake Lanier if you want to live.
Before we get too off the rails, Mr. Grant, do your thing.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you have any topic ideas, full episodes are getting booked up, but we will definitely work in anything that comes our way. If we can make it happen, you can always reach out to us at fromtherumbleseat@gmail.com or comment on our website, fromtherumbleseat.com. You can find us on Twitter at FTRS blog. I'm at jgrant98. And he's at Jack Nicholas. You cannot find Akshay. Sorry. You can find Section 103 on Twitter at Section 103 or section103.com, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at From the Rumble Seat. And you can find our podcast wherever fine podcasts are distributed. As always, good night, good luck, and go Jackets.